For our next stop, I'm delighted to share with you the story of three characters who won the heart of San Francisco in three very different ways. First, we have a pioneering female entrepreneur from the 1910s. Next, we have a hippie minister from the 1960s. And finally, we have a maniacal cult mastermind. Let's begin. First, we have Tessie Wall. Tessie Wall grew up in San Francisco. She grew up with an Irish-American family. She married a fireman and was ready to begin her happy middle-class life when her husband suddenly died. Now she was forced to raise their child alone. So Tessie began working as a servant for a family in Nob Hill. But Tessie soon realized that there was a lot more money to be made working as a dance hall girl on Market Street. Working in a bar, Tessie got paid to get men to drink, right? Social sort of thing, to dance, and for an extra fee, Tessie would join men in the bedrooms upstairs. Now, Tessie was wildly popular with the clientele. She was a voluptuous, blonde, blue-eyed vixen, as some might say. Now, a few years of doing this, Tessie accumulated enough money to open her own parlor. Yes, on O'Farrell Street. It was a three-story building. With the success of that parlor, she was able to open many more, including a giant brothel right here where we're standing. Yes. Having had success with business, Tessie found success with love next. Tessie met Frank DeRue. Frank was known as a gambler and a political fixer. So we take Frank's gambling, we take Tessie's brothels, and we have the Tenderloin's first ever power couple. Now that's a match made in heaven. Or maybe not in heaven, but a match made in the Tenderloin. The couple married, and at the reception there were 300 guests. And according to the San Francisco Examiner, they consumed 960 bottles of champagne. Now that is a party. I'm not sure I can handle that party, but that's a party. Soon after the wedding, Frank realized that his political ambitions could be hurt because he was married to a madam. So he spoke to Tessie. He said, "Babe, you gotta choose. Me or the brothel?" I don't know why he sounds like that, but he does. And Tessie responded, "Oh, Frank, you know I'll always love you for a price." That's right. Tessie chose the brothel. The success was too great for her to just walk away. And can you blame her? Well, soon after, Frank filed for divorce. Now, Tessie was still in love with Frank. And a few months later, Tessie spotted Frank leaving the St. Francis with a woman on his arm. Now, Tessie pleaded with him. She said, "Please, Frank, take me back. Please, Frank, I love you." And Frank said, "Baby, you made your decision, and I made mine." He just changed accents, but that's fine. Now, filled with passion and with emotion, Tessie did the only thing she could think to do. The only thing I think any of us could think to do in this sort of situation. She reached into her bag, she pulled out the silver-plated handgun, and she shot Frank 3 times in the back. She did that. Now, when the cops arrived, they said, "Tessie, why'd you shoot Frank? We thought you loved him." And that's when Tessie uttered her famous words. "I shot him because I love him, damn it!" Did you enjoy that? Thank you. Well, upon hearing this, Frank was roused. Yes, Frank was still alive. And he called the police over as he laid there. He called them over. And he said probably the most romantic words of this entire story. He said, "Come closer. Don't press charges." Yes, he told the police not to press charges. And guess what? They didn't. Now, isn't that the kind of love that we all sort of hope for? I know I do. Now, despite all of this trouble, Tessie was still loved by police and eventually even the mayor. Tessie would appear at parades. She was even seen publicly with the mayor on her arm. Tessie had the entire city in the palm of her hands. All except one person, her arch nemesis, the founder of the Glide Memorial United Methodist Church. That church went up directly across the street. Now, Lizzie Glide was a wealthy philanthropist and a devoted Methodist, and she was not happy with the rampant prostitution here in San Francisco. So she decided to open a big church across the street from Tessie's big brothel. Her goal was to save the souls of people while they were on their way in to Tessie's house of sin. As you can imagine, most of the people that she got were actually leaving the house of sin. But what can you do? Now let's fast forward. We're going to fast forward to 1960. And this church is still around and still suffering from low attendance and looking for a new direction. So they bring in Reverend Cecil Williams. And Cecil revitalizes the church, changes it completely. It's a completely different church once Cecil takes over. Cecil invited in jazz music, queer people, hipsters, or hippies, excuse me, the homeless, and ironically, sex workers. The church sort of became a hub for activism. During the Vietnam War, they invited anti-war speakers to come and speak. During the AIDS crisis, this church became the first church in the United States of America to offer free testing. The first church in the United States of America. Today, this church is still very popular here in San Francisco, providing about 3,500 meals per day. And Cecil is still active. Yes, Cecil is still active. But there's one stain on the history of Cecil. Cecil has one regret that I think still hangs with him today. You see, Cecil and the church both helped bring to power San Francisco's, most infamous cult leader, Jim Jones. Now, before Jim Jones was making headlines, Jim Jones was just a young boy growing up in Indiana, just like the rest of us, but in Indiana. Now, he thought he was very special for a long time, maybe even a messiah. I don't know. When he was a child, he even killed a cat because he thought he could bring the cat back to life. That's never happened to me, but this is the story. Now, Jim grew up studying religion, and as an adult, he opened his own church. Now, this church grew and became fairly popular, and by 1971, they opened headquarters here. And Jim had a great reputation as a civil rights leader because in Indiana, he worked on integration. Now, he referred to his church uh, as a rainbow collective, where everyone would be truly equal. Truly equal. Now, it's no surprise that Cecil Williams welcomed Jim with open arms, right? Who wouldn't? Their two churches even worked side by side. You see, Jim Jones' charisma drew in every person that he met, right? Including the mayor and a name that I'm sure you're all familiar with, Harvey Milk. You see, Jim Jones was able to radically change the political climate, the local political climate, I should say, just in San Francisco, of course, because he was able to bring his followers into the voting booth and tip the vote in their favors. And that's power. But of course, this did not last forever. Soon there were allegations of sexual abuse within the church. Now, this brought a lot of scrutiny to the People's Temple. And so, Jim and a few hundred of his followers abruptly left San Francisco and headed to the small country of Guyana in South America. And that is where they founded Jonestown. Now, Jonestown was supposed to be the embodiment of this rainbow where everyone would be equal, right? But as we found out, when secret agents and Congressman Leo Ryan visited, that was not the case. We found out that the people there were unsafe. They had no contact with the outside world, and they were not allowed to leave. That's correct, they couldn't even leave. And when Congressman Ryan tried to bring some of the followers back to the United States with him, they were ambushed at the airport and killed. That same night, Jim gathered the rest of his followers and presented them with a cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. What happened next is referred to as a mass suicide, but what it actually is, it's a massacre. 918 people died. 1/3 of them were children. Many were forced to do this against their will. And all of this happened because a maniacal leader won the hearts of the city.